Three stories, three moments in time. Sometimes a river carries more than just water. Sometimes a quiet game lasts a lifetime. And sometimes all we need is a place to lay down what we carry. Welcome. Step inside. Let the world outside grow quiet. Deep in the water towns of the south, where the mist touches the river and the morning sun rises slow, there lived a ferryman. His name was Wade. He was young. He was alone. His parents were gone. He had no land to farm. He had no kin to call his own. Only an old wooden boat left behind by his father. He kept his boat tied to a wide and quiet river. Right near the riverbank stood an ancient willow tree. Its trunk was thick and gnarled. Its branches dipped low, touching the water, dancing with the gentle ripples. This tree was where his days began. Every morning, before dawn broke through the mist, he would step under its long green leaves, untie the rope, and push his boat into the current. He carried many souls, farmers going to market, women with heavy baskets, scholars with book crates, travelers seeking rest. Wade spoke very little. When passengers stepped aboard, he pushed the pole. When they reached the shore, he rowed back. If someone had no money, he never asked. He carried them anyway. The people knew him. He was quiet. He was kind. One summer, the rains fell for days. The river grew wide. The water ran deep and fast. One morning, Wade saw something floating. It drifted close. It was a woman. Her long hair spread across the water. Her eyes were closed. She looked asleep. Wade pulled her into the boat. She was not breathing. He went to the villages. He asked everyone he met. No one knew her. No one came for her. So Wade dug a grave beneath the old willow tree, close to the water, under the shade. He buried her with care, and whenever the river grew quiet, he would look toward the willow tree and feel a gentle warmth in the breeze, as if her soul was resting, waiting by the shore. The seasons passed. Spring came again. The seasons passed. Spring came again. One morning, by the exact spot beneath the willow, Wade heard a soft sound, like a gentle sigh. He walked over. There was a bamboo basket. Inside lay a baby girl. Her eyes opened, deep, quiet, and familiar, as if a soul he once knew had finally come home. Wrapped in an old cloth, no one was near. No footprints in the mud. Wade waited until noon. No one returned. The baby cried. Wade had never held a child. His hands shook. He carried her to his boat. He tried to feed her rice water. She would not take it. He carried her through the village, door to door. He said only 4 words. She has no one. A mother took pity. She fed the child. Months passed. The child grew. Wade learned to feed her. He cooked the rice soft. He blew on every spoon. When she choked, he patted her back. One stormy night, she had a high fever. He held her close. He walked all night in the small cabin. He whispered, "Don't cry. Please don't cry." When morning came, she slept. His shirt was soaked with tears. He named her Willow because he found her under the tree. Willow grew quiet. She liked to sit by the river. She liked to climb the old tree. She sat on the high branches, looking at the water, looking at the sky. Wade would call from below, "Be careful, don't fall." She would smile down at him and look at the river again. When she was 7, she stepped onto the boat. She held the heavy pole. Wade stood behind her, his big hands over hers. Together, they pushed off from the shore. When she was 10, she helped the passengers. When an old woman forgot her coin, Willow charged nothing. She carried the heavy basket for her. Wade watched them from the boat. He did not say a word. He only nodded softly, because in her heart, he saw his own. When Willow turned 20, Wade grew older. His hair turned gray. He arranged a marriage for her to a kind farmer from the next village. On her wedding day, she wore a red dress. She looked at Wade for a long time. Her eyes grew red. Wade reached out. He smoothed a stray strand of hair. The sedan chair carried her away. Wade stood under the willow, watching until she was gone. The dock became quiet. Dinner had an empty seat. 6 months later, footsteps came down the path. It was Willow. Her husband walked behind her. Willow said, "I don't want to leave you. We are coming home." Her husband nodded. He said, "We can row together. We can stay together." That night, 3 bowls sat on the table. Wade drank his warm porridge. His heart was full. Years drifted by, like ripples on the water. Wade grew weak. His back ached. Willow and her husband rowed the boat. Wade sat by the shore, watching them. One quiet morning, there was no wind. The river was like a mirror. Wade lay in his bed. He held Willow's hand. He whispered, "Are there passengers today?" Willow said, "Yes, Father." "Is the boat sturdy?" Willow said, "It is. I wiped it clean yesterday." Wade closed his eyes and went to sleep. They buried him under the willow tree, next to the nameless grave. No high stone, only smooth river pebbles. The next morning, before dawn, Willow untied the rope. A villager asked, "Will you still run the ferry?" Willow looked at the river. She said, "I will." The pole dipped into the water. The boat glided away. And beneath the ancient willow, two quiet graves rested side by side, listening to the river. One journey ends at the river. Another begins deep in the quiet woods. Here is a story about patience, forgiveness, and a game 30 years in the making. Deep in the misty mountains, in a quiet, lonely temple, there lived an old monk named Master Ray. It was the dead of winter. A bitter wind blew through the pines. On the snow-covered mountain path, a 7-year-old boy lay motionless. He was thin, only skin and bones. His clothes were tattered rags. His lips were cracked and purple. He was seconds away from death. Master Ray was returning from the nearby village. When he saw the small body in the snow, he lifted the boy gently into his arms, carried him up the steep stone steps, and laid him beside the hearth. For 3 days the boy hovered between life and death. Master Ray warmed small cups of water, boiled thin rice porridge, and fed him spoonfuls, one by one. Slowly, the color returned to the child's cheeks. He opened his eyes. The boy remembered very little. He did not know where he came from. He remembered only cold roads, harsh winters, beggars shouting in crowded markets, and going days without a bite to eat. When Master Ray asked his name, the boy shook his head. So the old monk smiled gently and named him Ming. Ming stayed at the temple. Life was simple. Every morning before dawn, the big brass bell rang 3 times. They sat together on woven mats, in absolute silence, learning to still their thoughts. Whenever their chores were finished, they walked out to the courtyard. There sat a heavy stone table, shaded by an ancient pine tree. On the table rested a grid board carved from dark wood, and 2 small jars of polished stones, black and white. Master Ray began to teach Ming the game of Wei Qi. He did not just teach him rules. He taught him how to see the board. "This is not a battle of strength," the monk said. It is a battle of space. He showed Ming how the four corners and the edges held the most value, how to surround territory with the fewest stones, how to extend across open space, and how to protect one's ground. "Why don't we capture all their stones?" young Ming asked one day. Master Ray placed a white stone down on a corner point. "Because chasing every stone wastes breath," he replied. "A wise player focuses on securing territory, not taking lives." When Ming made a mistake and lost space, Master Ray never raised his voice. He simply picked up the pieces, placed them back in their jars, and whispered, "Again." When Ming won a hard-fought game, Master Ray would smile warmly and nod. "Well played, young one," the old monk would say gently. "You read the board with patience today." Then he would point softly to the borders and ask, "Do you know where you almost lost control?" Ming grew older. He learned that the game was not about anger or greed. It was about mastering his own heart. To see 5 steps ahead. To stay calm when threatened. To claim space only when the time was right. 10 years passed like flowing water. Ming was now 17. Tall, quiet, and strong. One autumn afternoon, under the falling red leaves, the master and disciple played again. The board was crowded with territories. Black and white borders locked together tightly. Ming picked up a black stone. He paused for a long time. He felt the wind in the trees. He heard the faint sound of the temple bell. Then he placed the stone down on a vital point in the corner of the board. Master Ray stared at the position. He looked at the black territory securing the edges. He counted the points in his head. Black held the victory. Silence fell over the courtyard. For the first time in 10 years, Master Ray smiled a deep, tired smile. He set his remaining pieces on the board. "You have won," he said softly. "It is time for you to leave." Ming was startled. "Where should I go, Master?" Master Ray reached deep into the folds of his thick robe. He drew out a wooden box. Inside lay a single black stone. It was older than the rest. Its edges were worn completely smooth from decades of touch. He placed it into Ming's palm. "Once you descend this mountain," the monk said, "you must fulfill 2 duties. First, take this stone to Lin An. Go to the grand house by the West Lake. Find a man named Master Lin. 30 years ago, he was the grand champion of the imperial court. Now he lives in quiet seclusion. Give him this stone and tell him I sent you. Second, on your way, pass through Gusu. Outside the city walls lies a quiet burial ground. Near the back fence, under a weeping willow, you will find 2 small, nameless graves. Side by side, The wooden marker says only, "May mother and son rest in peace." Clear the weeds. Light 3 sticks of incense, and bow for me. Ming held the cool, polished stone tight in his hand. "Who are they, Master?" he asked. "And who is Master Lin?" Master Ray closed his eyes. He folded his hands in his lap. "The past is a heavy shadow," he murmured. "Go. You will understand when the game ends." He said no more. The next morning, Ming packed a canvas bag. He bowed to his master at the temple gate and walked down the mountain path alone. He arrived in Gusu first. It was a city of canals and narrow stone bridges. Outside the grand city walls, he found the burial ground. It was neglected, overgrown with tall, wild grass. Ming searched near the back fence. Beneath the drooping branches of a weeping willow, he found 2 small mounds of earth. The wood marker was weathered and dark. On it were carved 5 simple words. "May mother and son rest in peace." An old caretaker was sweeping dry leaves nearby. He stopped and watched Ming. "Are those your kin?" the caretaker asked. "They belong to my master," Ming said. The caretaker shook his head sadly. 30 years ago, a young mother came to the city in winter. She had a sick infant in her arms. She sat on the steps of the apothecary, begging for aid. No one helped in time. By nightfall, both were gone. A grieving man came weeks later, wept until his voice failed, and buried them here. Ming felt a sharp tightness in his chest. He pulled the weeds from the soil. He swept the earth clean. He lit 3 sticks of fragrant incense, planted them in the ground, and bowed 3 times until his forehead touched the dirt. Then he stood up and turned south toward Linan. Linan was rich and magnificent. By the edge of the blue lake stood a grand courtyard house. High white walls, red lacquered doors, guard dogs barking behind iron gates. This was the home of Master Lin. 30 years ago, he was the undisputed titan of Wei Qi. In the final tournament before the emperor, he had faced his greatest rival, a brilliant young player named Ray. The tournament was legendary. They played for 3 days straight. In the final match, the board was locked in a deadly clash for territory. Onlookers held their breath. The grand prize was unimaginable. Gold from the imperial treasury, a high title, estates in 3 provinces, immortal fame. Midway through the game, as tension reached its peak, a runner brought a message to Ray. His wife and young son traveling to join him, had fallen ill outside Linan. They were in desperate need of aid, and every passing hour placed their lives in greater danger. Ray looked at the board. He looked at his rival, Lin. Then, slowly, he picked up his stones. He set them down and said quietly to the judges, "I resign." The hall erupted in shock. Ray rushed out into the cold night. Master Lin won by default. He received the gold, the estates, the praise of the emperor himself. But Lin was consumed by pride and fear. He feared Ray would return one day to claim the title. So, Lin used his new wealth and influence to spread rumors. He told the guilds that Ray was a coward, that he fled because he was afraid to lose, that he had no honor. The Wei Chi community turned its back on Ray. No shop would host him. No master would speak his name. Ruined, disgraced, and broken by the loss of his family, Ray abandoned the world. He walked deep into the mountains, built a small temple, and became a monk. Master Lin had everything he ever dreamed of. Disciples filled his courtyard. Poets wrote songs about his skill. Yet, after that day, he could never enjoy the game again. Every time he sat before a board, he felt an empty chair across from him. At 35, at the height of his fame, he abruptly quit. He closed his doors and spent 20 years in solitude. Ming knocked on the red lacquered doors. A servant opened them. After seeing the old black stone in Ming's hand, the servant's eyes widened. He led Ming through silent bamboo gardens to a small pavilion overlooking the water. There sat Master Lin. His hair was pure white. His face was lined with deep wrinkles. He was staring at an empty wooden board. Ming stepped forward. He placed the old black stone on the edge of the board. Master Lin looked at the stone. His hand began to tremble. A drop of sweat rolled down his temple. "He sent you?" Lin whispered. His voice was like dry leaves scraping across stone. Ming nodded. "My master is Ray. He asked me to bring this to you." Lin closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, the cold pride of his youth was entirely gone. Only a deep, heavy exhaustion remained. "He wants his final match," Lin said quietly. "He wants to finish what was left 30 years ago." Lin gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit down, boy. We play one game. If you lose, take this stone and leave my sight forever. If you win, I will give you what your master truly sought." They sat down as the sun began to set over the lake. The game was agonizingly slow. Lin played with the desperate precision of an old master fighting for his soul. Ming played with the steady, quiet patience taught to him in the mountains. Night fell. Servants lit paper lanterns around the pavilion. The faint smell of jasmine filled the cool air. Midnight came and went. Neither player spoke. Only the rhythmic clack of stones echoed over the water. As the first faint light of dawn brushed the sky, Ming picked up the old black stone his master had given him. He looked at the quiet corner of the board. There was a single, vital point left. Clack! Ming placed the stone firmly into the corner. Master Lin froze. He leaned forward, counting the territory on the board. He calculated the spaces on the left, the right, the corners. Black held the larger half. Every pathway for white to fight back was gone. Master Lin fell back into his wooden chair. He closed his eyes and let out a long, shuddering breath. It was the sound of a man putting down a weight he had carried for half a lifetime. 30 years, Lin whispered. 30 years I waited for this move. He looked up at Ming, tears shining in his tired eyes. Your master did not send you to defeat me out of anger, Lin said softly. He sent this stone to tell me he has carried no hatred in his heart. He gave up fame to save his family. I kept fame and lived in a prison of my own making. Lin reached into a chest beside his table. He pulled out a thick, sealed letter stamped with his personal wax seal. Inside was a full confession of his rumors, written to clear Ray's name forever, along with the title deed to the estates given by the emperor. Lin handed the letter to Ming. Take this back to the mountain, Lin said, bowing his head low to the young boy. Tell your master that in this game and in life, I concede. Ming took the letter and left the grand house behind. He walked quickly, traveling night and day back toward the mountains. When he finally climbed the steep stone steps of the temple, he found Master Ray sitting in the courtyard. The old monk was frail. His breathing was shallow and slow. Ming knelt beside him. He placed the letter into his master's weak hands and set the old black stone back in his palm. Master Lin counted the territory. Ming whispered. He begged for your forgiveness. He said, he concedes. Master Ray looked down at the letter. He did not open it. He simply nodded gently. A serene, peaceful smile appeared on his old face. He closed his fingers around the smooth black stone, folded his hands over his chest, and closed his eyes for the last time. The next morning, as the sun rose over the mist, Ming buried his master on the quiet hill behind the temple, beside a tall, ancient pine tree. When the earth was smoothed over, Ming returned to the courtyard stone table. He arranged the pieces and played a Wei-Chi game against himself. Halfway through the game, he held a stone above the board. He looked at the empty temple around him. He heard the breeze rustling the mountain leaves. He realized he no longer needed to play. Ming placed the black stone carefully back into its wooden box. He set the lid on top and stepped down the mountain to live his own life. Decades passed. The temple eventually grew old and deserted. Moss covered the roof. Weeds grew between the stone steps. Yet travelers who wandered high into the mountains would often find a weathered stone table standing in the courtyard. On it sat an unfinished game of Wei-Chi, covered in a fine layer of winter dust. Except for one ancient black stone in the corner, which remained wiped completely clean. As the night deepens, we return once more to the quiet shore, where the land meets the ocean. In a quiet little town stands a small shop. Its sign hangs softly in the breeze. A quiet place. Outside the door, a blackboard stands. It said, "No money needed. Leave what feels heavy. Take what makes you happy." The shop was a 2-story house. Downstairs, the store. Upstairs, the owner lived. His name was Ken. Ken was 50 years old. He was a man of few words. By the window, a cozy corner, old chairs, a low table, a thermos, a few cups, tea and hot water, always free. People could sit, read, stare at the sea, or speak very softly. Ken's parents had been wealthy and strict. Rules for everything. When to eat, when to sleep, what to study, what never to touch. They expected so much from him. Grades, manners, a bright future. He was rarely praised, mostly told, not enough. He grew up under a heavy weight. not the weight of poverty, but the weight of being watched, of being measured, of never quite measuring up. When his parents passed away, they left him money and a large old house. To others, a blessing. To him, heavy stones. One day, he sold the house, took the money, came to this seaside town, bought the little building, shop below, home above. For the first time, he felt a little lighter. So he opened this place, a shop that only traded, never took money. Not many people came regularly, but a few faces became familiar. One was Mira, a young woman in her 20s. The first time she walked in, she looked exhausted. Her eyes distant. She stood in front of the shelves for a long time. Then she placed a silver necklace box on the counter. "This is heavy," she said. Inside, a photograph of her father. Ken took it, nodded, gestured toward the shelves. Mira chose an old teacup. Its pattern was faded, but clean. When she left, her steps were lighter than when she arrived. She came back every few days. Sometimes she left an old train ticket, sometimes an unsent letter, sometimes a dried flower. Each time she took something that made her feel a little happier. An old book of poems, a smooth stone, a faded wooden top. One day she brought nothing. She simply poured herself tea, sat by the window, and watched the sea for a long time. As she left, she said, "Today, there's nothing I need to leave behind." Ken only replied, Another regular was an old man, over 70, slightly stooped. Every time he came, he set something down first. An old pocket watch, a pipe worn smooth, a pair of reading glasses. His hand would linger on the counter a second longer. Once he brought an old violin, placed it quietly on the counter, said nothing. Ken took it. The old man stood before the shelves for a long while, then chose an old brass compass. As he left, he plucked a single string, a soft note, and smiled to himself. There was also a middle-aged man, around 40, always in a wrinkled shirt. He came less often, but what he left was heavy. A stack of old contracts, an empty bottle, a photograph torn in half and taped back together. He always hesitated before choosing. Usually he took something small and simple, a rusted key, an empty picture frame, a diary filled with someone else's stories. He would hold the small object in his hand, look out at the sea for a moment, and walk quietly back into the night. One evening after closing, Mira stayed to help wipe the shelves. Suddenly, she asked, "Why did you open a shop like this?" Ken thought for a moment. "My parents left me many things: money, a house, expectations. From the time I was small, everything felt heavy. I almost never felt truly happy. After I sold the old house and bought this place, I finally felt a little lighter. So I wanted a shop where people could leave what feels heavy and take what makes them happy." Mira spoke softly. "I was always trying to hold on to things I could no longer reach, or gripping too tightly the things that were already too heavy. The tighter I held, the more it hurt. But I still wouldn't let go. I couldn't reach them, and I couldn't carry them either." Winter came. Mira found work at the harbor mending fishing nets. She slept better. She visited the shop less often. When she did come, she mostly sat by the window with tea. Sometimes she nodded to the old man. Sometimes she simply watched the sea. One morning, she walked in carrying everything she had once taken. She placed them on the counter. "I don't need these anymore," she said. "I feel lighter now." Ken asked, "What about the necklace box? Do you want it back?" Mira shook her head. "No, keep it. Inside is a photo of my father. After he passed away, I carried it everywhere. Later, I realized I was using it to remind myself to be sad instead of just remembering him." Ken nodded. He put the box in the farthest drawer. At the door, Mira paused. "Thank you for letting me leave the heavy and painful things here." Ken answered, "Things can stay. People still have to keep walking." She smiled and left. Years passed. Mira still walked by sometimes, but she rarely came inside. Once Ken saw her at the harbor, mending nets with other workers. Her skin was darker, her eyes quieter. The old man disappeared for a while. When he returned, he sat by the window and spent days quietly fixing the old violin. When he was finished, he placed it on the counter and said, "I fixed this one. Leave it here. Anyone who wants to play can play." The middle-aged man came even less often, but one day he took a blank notebook. Before leaving, he told Ken, "I want to try writing my story." Ken himself grew older. The shop stayed open. One afternoon, a young stranger walked in. He stood before the shelves for a long time. Then he came to the counter. Hesitantly, he took something from his pocket and set it on the table. Ken looked at him, calmly repeated the words written on the blackboard. "No money needed. Leave what feels heavy. Take what makes you happy." The young man nodded, turned back toward the shelves. The shop grew quiet again. By the window, the the tea was still warm, sea wind gently moved the 3 words on the sign: a quiet place. As our last story comes to an end, may your mind be as quiet as the shop by the sea. Thank you for sharing this cozy space with me tonight. Allow your eyes to grow heavy, your body to relax, and drift off into a deep, restful sleep. Good night and sweet dreams.